Hello everyone, welcome back to Legacy Larder. I'm Andy, and today we're making cookies. We're going to make honey icebox cookies. And for those of you who are maybe in the younger generation, an icebox is a proto-fridge. So they take big blocks of ice, stick them in the top part of the fridge, the cold air would circulate down, keep your food cool from rotting, preserve it a little bit longer before we move to the electric models of today. So these cookies are pretty simple. They don't have a lot of ingredients in them, but they won the Milwaukee Fair. I don't have the year because this is from my great-great-grandmother, her friend Agnes. So let's get into them and see what this looks like and see how Agnes did. I mean, if it won a fair, if it won at the fair, it's got to be good. So let's check it out. Our ingredients today, our process for putting this together. We are going to start off by creaming 1 cup of honey and with 1 cup of brown sugar. I was lucky enough to get this honey from a relative of mine. She has beehives, a couple of beehives at her place, and her husband do. So this honey is actually like pretty close to the vine, homegrown stuff. So get that in there. If you can get honey locally, do it. Support your local farmers markets and people who are going through the work to make sure that you can have better ingredients closer to home. That's always a good thing. If you are not able to do something like that, with honey in particular, check to be sure that it's actually honey, because there are, unfortunately, some honey counterfeits out there. So make sure your honey, any honey that you do get, if it's not from a local producer, that it has a certification stamp from, I can't remember, it's the United States Honey Producing, I don't know. Look for verified honey when you are purchasing honey. Okay, so we've got a cup of honey in here. Now we're going to add 1 cup of brown sugar. And these get creamed together. So make sure I got everything in there. Let's get this blitzed up until creamed. I don't know what everyone uses for a measure of when is it creamed, when is it not creamed. What I try to look for is the color of, usually it's butter and sugar, fat and sugar that you're creaming together. And what I look for is when things start to lighten up in color. That tells me that there's enough air being worked into the mixture. That things are, that's what I think of as creamed. Maybe there's some more scientific way of measuring to find out if your fats and your sugars are creamed or not, but that's what I use. I wait until everything looks like it's getting a little bit lighter in color, and it's a little bit fluffier. So finish this off and start adding our other ingredients. Okay, we have creamed honey and brown sugar, 1 cup of each. Now, let's get back to the recipe. We start to add in all the other ingredients. We have 2 eggs here, and they need to be beaten with a half a teaspoon of baking soda. So I'll get these cracked. Ready? Alright, here are our 2 eggs. And we have a half a teaspoon of baking soda. I've never added baking soda right to eggs before, so I wonder if it must foam up. Eggs are watery as well. Alright, 2 eggs, whipped up, or well beaten, with a bit of baking soda. So let's add that to our mix. I'll pull everything back here. Pull that in. I'm going to also give everything a good scraping too, because it's hard to say how perfect everything has to be with some of these recipes. This one I've never made before, so This is an adventure recipe and kind of the point of the channel. When this idea started off, I made a batch of cookies from an old family recipe book, and they were really, really watery, the batter was. And if I hadn't checked with another family member to find out what was going on, they wouldn't have turned out. So this is, I want to see how these recipes are. Agnes, was your Milwaukee Fair cookie recipe really that good, or was there something else that you did that day that didn't make it into the recipe book? We're going to try to find out. 2 eggs added in. Now we are going to 2 eggs with baking soda, actually. So I've got a a quarter teaspoon of salt. So put that in, and I've got 1 cup of shortening. So I'm using vegetable shortening for this. It doesn't specify in the recipe, but so I'm going to use vegetable shortening. If the recipes call for lard, I'll be using lard. Whenever I can get the original or as close to the original ingredients, I'm planning on doing that, because the whole point here is to try to recapture what was originally made and taste that bit of history. So I'm going to get this a little bit more under control before I add the flour, our last ingredient. Okay, that's better. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll get everything fixed up here in the end. Okay, now I've got our last ingredient, and that's 3.5 cups of flour. So I'm going to get this in. When you're adding in flour to a bunch of wet stuff and you gotta mix it up, I would advise that you do not start off your mixer full blast, because if you go all Dog the Bounty Hunter on your batter full of flour, it's gonna give you a mushroom cloud of flour all over yourself and the kitchen and everything else. So start slow, keep your mixer buried. I think this is thick enough. We can actually knead it like a dough, and that's actually what the recipe says. So it says knead into a roll. I'm going to get these cleaned off a little bit, and we will cover your ears, everyone. We will knead this into a roll, and then it has to be refrigerated for a bit. So if you have children, this is about the part where they want to be enlisted real bad. I suppose a nice big spoon would have also worked well for this. But we'd be missing an opportunity to use our hands. And the recipe says knead, not stir. So though, now that I'm doing this, I think stirring would have been a better way to get this job done. Okay, that's real sticky. Probably owing to the honey and sugar and everything else. So we are now going to refrigerate this. The recipe doesn't tell me how long to refrigerate it or what to look for. But I'm betting that the goal is to have a stiffer dough that we can actually work with to make into cookie form. Right now, everything's pretty gooey, as you can see. So I'm going to scrape the sides down a little bit, and we'll put a bit of plastic wrap over the top. Recipe doesn't specify, but it makes me feel a little bit better to have something covering it, just in case something else drops inside. You don't want yesterday's bratwurst falling into your cookie recipe, especially Agnes's Milwaukee Fair prize-winning cookie recipe. So I'm going to cover this up, we'll get it in the fridge, and check back when it's time to bake. The honey icebox cookies have been sitting in the fridge for probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. Our batter is now nice and stiff. So our next step in the recipe is to bake it at 350 degrees. I don't have how long they should bake or how they should be, if the pan should be greased or not. We're going to start off without a greased pan and just see how it goes. And I think I will use my handy scooper here so we have the same size cookie being happening every time, and we'll see how that works out. Okay, here is the first little batch of honey icebox cookies. They look and smell really, really good. They have a great shape. They're browning nice and evenly. They smell like honey heaven. So I'm gonna let these sit on the tray for just a minute or two, and then I'm gonna put them on a cooling rack, so they can cool a little bit quicker and we can try one out. In the meantime, let's get another pan of those all set up. Alright, here's pan number 2. Delicious and delicate honey cookies. Side note too, I ended up cooking those for 13 minutes. So I'll write that in the recipe at the end. There was no time listed in the recipe, just the temperature of the oven at 350, and it turned out to be 13 minutes, at least in my oven. So you might have to go up or down a minute or two with your own if it's hotter or cooler, but that at least will give you a starting point if you decide to try these, and I sure hope you do. Alright, let's get these cookies off of the cookie sheet and onto a cooling rack. I've got an offset spatula here. Often see these for cake frosting. They also work nicely for sliding under cookies because they're kind of thin. Get under a couple at a time, move them on over. Okay, just a few more, and we'll load up our last batch of cookies. We just have a few more to finish off Agnes's famous award-winning recipe here. All right, let's get these beautiful babies in the oven. Slide off the next batch of cookies using our offset spatula. It's good to let the cookies, when you first bring them out of the oven, to sit on the pan for just a little bit, a couple of minutes, just to let them cool cool a little bit, firm up, and then they won't flop apart on you when you're taking them, transferring from the cookie pan, cookie sheet over to whatever your cooling rack or I've used paper bags, like shopping bags, tear them open and lay them flat, or just lay them if you don't want to tear them up. And that a lot of the grease and oils from the cookie will soak out into the paper. I don't know if it makes any difference health-wise. You're still eating a cookie, but maybe if it makes you feel better, go for it. But that's another cheapo cooling rack solution. All right, those are looking delicious. Okay, our last cookies are in the oven. When those are done, we'll get them offloaded onto the cooling rack, and we'll see what these things are like. See if Agnes was onto something here. Here's our last batch. Last pan out of the oven. There we go. Okay, let those sit for a moment and get them onto the cooling rack after they've cooled a little bit on the pan. All right, let's check these out. So, the test of a good squishy cookie isn't the instant it comes out of the oven, because they're all warm and gooey and delicious, and that's kind of to be expected. Everything's still soft and melted. The test for a squishy cookie is after it's been sitting out for a while. Hopefully outside of a bag or a box or anything like that, just out in the open air, so you can see how squishy that cookie really is. Is it a soft? If you like your cookie soft, you'll be able to tell after it's been sitting out for a little while. Maybe this is what won Agnes the blue ribbon at the Milwaukee Fair. Oh yeah, nice and soft. There's a, boy, that's a beautiful crumb. These look pretty good. Let's give them a try. All right. Agnes knew what she was up to. These are pretty darn good. It's not a... You have to like honey. They're very, very powerfully honey flavored, but that's okay by me. They're nice and soft. They're pretty delicious. Yep, that's a keeper. Crispy around the outside, very soft in the middle. Beautiful pattern on the top. They didn't all, flatten out and become paper thin. There's a bit of cookie there, a bit of heft, a bit of loft. Not cake-like though. They're not super fluffy. They're just right. They're just right. Go Agnes. Hopefully wherever Agnes ended up, she got a little bit of extra credit on her way there. These are okay. Yeah. All right, well, these were and are honey icebox cookies. So if you'd like to try out the recipe, I'll have it at the end of the video. I sure hope you do. These are very unique. It's not a cookie you're going to find in the grocery store, that's for sure. And they won the Milwaukee Fair. You don't get to come across one of those every day. From probably around 100 years ago in that time frame, from Agnes. So from Agnes, through me to you, enjoy these cookies. I hope you make them. Be good to each other. I'm Andy. This is Legacy Larder, and I hope you all join me again next time. I hope to see you soon.